Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar sleeves. Support the show by using the code MagicMics at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey, guys.
Ruben Bressler.
What's up? It is snowing here.
Wow.
It's snowing outside of my window for the first time in, I want to say 2 years. It hasn't snow. It didn't snow the last time I was here, and then I hadn't been home for a while because pandemic. So yeah, that was nice to see.
I
Nice.
mean, I have had my window open in Orlando, Florida, all day. It's
Okay.
so nice out there.
All right, buddy.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, my roommates are telling me it's 90, so I'm glad I'm not out there.
Oh, well, that sucks. Well, it's great down here for now. Don't worry, it gets crappy later. We don't get this for long.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who is the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Crimson Vow cards. Ruben?
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of opportunity to look at Crimson Vow and see what it will do to various formats, but the good ship Zion wanted us to know that as a Pauper player, I'm excited about Kessig Flame Breather. With Thermo Alchemist and Firebrand Archer, the Flame Breather will now give us 12 total creatures that ping all opponents when instants and sorceries are played. And with Ponder and Preordain and Brainstorm, all legal, ...
Nice.
Yeah,
well,
that's pretty cool.
yeah, that's reading it. I would note that, Thermo Alchemist is definitely dope in that regard, and Firebrand Archer also, but Kessig Firebreather is even a little better than that. It's a red and a generic mana for a 1/3 common human shaman that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Kessig Firebreather does 1 damage to each opponent. So artifacts can come out there. There's no planeswalkers and Pauper, but
Pauper,
it's some enchantments still trigger, which is
Artifacts,
nice.
enchantments, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. And this card does do enough sort of incidental damage to get your opponent down to death with creatures like Thermal Alchemist hanging around.
Yeah, there's another werewolf that does the similar ability that's got a ping on both sides of it, which is really strong. And this is one of the first times in Limited we've seen a ping on multiple pings in the same format, which is going to make that particular deck a little bit scarier. Now, it does say, non-creature spell as opposed to instant or sorcery. So it's a bit wider, but there's a little less instant and sorcery support. So we would expect to see that. But yeah, definitely interesting.
It's a 1/3, which Thermo Alchemist blocks, but it doesn't kill a token, right? The Kuldotha Rebirth decks still exist. So it can stand in front of a 1/1, and you don't want to put a 2/1 Firebrand in front of a 1/1. This thing holds off. Like, this thing actively makes people not want to attack with tokens, which is also a big deal.
I don't know how many sets it's going to take. I don't know how many it's going to be. We're talking, I'm Lucy and the football when it comes to the blue-red spells deck in Limited. I got this guy. I got like 2 or 3 of this guy, plus the uncommon werewolf. Bunch of spells died. Just 0-3'd, whatever, like just died horribly. I've done it almost every set. What do they say? Blue-red is the spells, deck that you draft. And I had it in Strixhaven with all the different spells you could rebuy and all that stuff. And nope, didn't work there. It didn't work in the D&D set. And it didn't work when I tried in this either. I want it to work. I want it to work. It's my
It's
white
hit or
whale.
miss. It definitely is hit or miss, and it has not hit for a while.
I have yet to get a 7-1 deck from Blue-Red in God knows how long. That said, congratulations to Good Ship Zion. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it's time to talk about the top 10 Gatecrash and Dragon's Maze cards. We did want to talk about Dragon's Maze. Not worth it. Didn't want to leave it out. Also a little bad, I think, in many ways. But didn't want to just, it's time to lump them together. Gatecrash and Dragon's Maze, 2 terrible tastes that don't taste that great really together either.
Yeah. Dragon's Maze was real bad, and Gatecrash was no spring chicken either. Looking back on it, one of the stats that I found when doing my research was there are 0 cards outside of the Shocklands, which I'm not counting as being from Gatecrash.
Right.
There are 0 cards from Gatecrash or Dragon's Maze in the current Magic Online Cube, Vintage or Legacy. So
wow,
that says not great things about your Legacy as you're going forward.
That's rough. That's rough. Well, that said, let's get started here with our number 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
There may not be any cards in the cube. There may not have been a ton of competitive cards, honestly, in the two sets. But very rarely does a card come along and it takes the Magic zeitgeist by storm. It completely captures the imagination of the entire player base, not because of what the card does, but because of the character that we're introduced to on Totally Lost.
Nice.
Totally Lost is 4 generic and a blue mana for an instant that puts target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, but that's not why we're here. We're here because phibolthop is here. And phibolthop has always hated crowds. And it's so cute.
It's the art is like he's really tiny on the thing, right? Is that it? Oh my gosh. Yep. I remember everybody kind of lost it when that card was like shown.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then they made a reprint of it with new art in War of the Spark that called back to phibolthop. Like called back to the same character. That like the indelibility, they made a plushie of phibolthop. Mm-hmm. Like the indelibility of this character came out of nowhere and persisted to this day.
It's one of those things that, you know, as a player base, as a community, we will latch on to unique, you know, interesting characters, and his look is totally unique. No one looks anything like what this creature looks like, and like if there's that sort of weird, there's a feeling, it's very emotive, so it's kind of cool in that way. You can use it for a lot of memes, which is also great. It's memed all over the place, which was fun. And yeah, I will take any cool character that they latch onto and we run with. Give me more phibolthops all day.
Yeah, they had a little dice bag purse that they made, official Ultra Pro product or something like that, which was pretty interesting. I see people carry around sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Nerd Girl, what's your number 10?
All right, so my number 10 is a card that, you know, everybody kind of likes, a big dumb idiot, especially in casual play. And also around this time, we're starting to see, you know, each opponent type of text show up a lot more. So my number 10 is the Sylvan Primordial. This is a 7 mana avatar. It's a 6/8 creature with reach. It's one of those sneak reachers. And then whenever it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent that player controls. For each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a forest card, put that onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is actually banned in EDH. It made things that awkward. And
wow.
I mean, I wasn't playing EDH at the time, but I certainly am glad that I didn't have to deal with it.
That came out of nowhere. I was like, oh, that's cool. 7 mana, 6/8, kind of a dork. He destroys stuff. And I'm like, wait, is it banned in Commander or what?
Banned in Commander. If you can take out your opponent's land and then go get yourself another one, like these, I mean, it's no Primeval Titan, but
you blink
this also shows you how good Primeval Titan is, that this is also banned, right? Yeah. I also love Big Dumb Idiots, which is why I said yes to hosting this show.
Oh, wow. Hey-o. That's a me dig. All right, so for my number 10 here, I had, you know, this is one of those that I don't have a lot of cards from Dragon's Maze. The set was not great. All right, it was fine. It wasn't fine. Okay, it was not very good, but I want to love it much like you want to love, like, you know, the sad toy that nobody else plays with. You know, well, what's the good parts about this? Well, I had a good time checking out this card, seeing this card just briefly in standard for like half a second. This was also included as one of the cards in the historic anthology, and honestly, I wish I just bought that anthology, because there's no way in hell, as much as I want to play this deck in historic, I'm not crafting 4 mythic wild cards to play Maze's End in historic. But Maze's End is a hell of a card. This is the card that's supposed to tie the whole story together. And this is where they, like, all the champions and the runners ended up in the Maze's End so they could figure out who's going to run the plane or whatever. Maze's End enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add 1 generic mana to your mana pool and 3 generic mana tap, return it to its owner's hand, search your library for a gate card, put it on the battlefield and shuffle. If you control 10 or more gates with 10 different names or with different names, you win the game. Now, gates were multicolor lands of the 2 colors of each guild pair, and if you had, of course, all 10 of the gates and you did the ability, congratulations, you win. Whee! And this apparently every once in a while, for whatever reason, because nobody plays around it, can get there in Historic. And I think that's fun and cool, and I would love to try that deck out. And there ain't no way I'm crafting 4 Mythic Wild cards for this thing. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the lesson.
I love this card. This was like my second, this probably would have been my number 2 on my Dragon's Maze list. I literally have 1 card from Dragon's Maze on my list. This is so close. Like, it ties the room together. It tells you what the thing is. Like, the gates are cool. You play this with like Guild Summit and Gates Ablaze and Gatebreaker Ram and some other idiots, Gate Colossus, other cards that have the word gate in the name.
Yeah, you just search up gate, just put them on there.
Yeah, open the gates. And this is such a cool effect, and it's also cool in like Commander, where you just have 1 of them. It technically goes infinite with 4 copies of Amulet of Vigor, right? Is that how that works?
Kinda.
No, you'd need like a fast bond or something. But in any case, it's a cool card.
Yeah.
This was also one of my only other 2, like one of the 2 cards I was considering putting on the list. And I was like, well, it's not, I couldn't think of anything quite exciting enough to put it on the list, but it was definitely something that made the format work. So it's definitely worth mentioning for sure.
I wish this card was just a little bit better as like the tagline for the whole set, like for the whole Dragon's Maze. I wish it was just a hair more interesting, just a hair better. All right, so let's move here to number 9. Ruben, what's number 9?
It's a top 10 list, and that means it's time for Ruben to talk about his Arcades Defenders Commander deck. This one is like a major win condition in my Arcades deck, and it also gets me to teach you all about Commander color identity a little bit, because Basilica Guards is a weirdo to see in a green, white, blue Commander deck, wouldn't you say? 2 generic and a white for a 1/4 human soldier with Defender and Extort. The reminder text of which is whenever you cast a spell, you can pay either a white or a black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. 2 things about this. Multiplayer format, I'm gaining a bunch of life, right? That's a pretty darn good investment if I'm paying 1 mana to gain 3 and drain 3 across the table. And reminder text does not count against color identity. So I can play this, or you can play cards that have Extort in decks that aren't necessarily both white and black at the same time.
Nice. I didn't know that was a thing you could do in the color identity thing. Oh, nice. Cool. I mean, Extort as a mechanic, we're going to see, I think, a lot more just because it's one of the first mechanics that really felt multiplayer friendly. It was like, it specifically says each opponent for that reason.
Yeah, the each opponent, they're introducing a ton more of that, I think, for Arena, because it reduces the amount of clicks that you have to do. And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of these funky cards where it wasn't necessarily designed to do what it's going to be doing in EDH, but it's definitely going to do some crazy stuff.
Nice. Nerd Girl, what's number 9?
My number 9 is my first of 4 hires.
Ooh, so many hires. All right, well, we'll get through these quickly.
That just means that your list is more correct.
It's
because the fact that we don't agree more means we've got some wilder crap.
Well, look, I desperately want to love Dragon's Maze. I wanted to love it. I want to love every Magic set. I want every Magic set to be great. I want Magic sets to be fun and to have cool cards that do really interesting things. And so when I saw this card, I was like, oh my God, this is a cool card. I want this to be a cool card. It might have seen maybe a one-of play in a sideboard for a couple months. Maybe that's about the best you can say for all of Dragon's Maze cards, except for one, which we'll get to later. But for this card in particular, I love it. I saw it and I was just like, you know what? I just feel like this is the coolest way we're going to get anything close to a not a Thornlane, but a what's the
Morphling?
card name? Morphling. Thank you very much. The closest thing we're going to do to a Morphling is an Aetherling. Yeah. Aetherling was 2 blue and 4 generic mana for a 4/5 rare creature shapeshifter. It has 4 abilities. 1 blue, exile it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. For 1 blue, it's unblockable. For 1 generic mana, it gets +1, -1 until end of turn. And for 1 generic mana, it gets -1, +1 until end of turn. This is the Morphling that we wanted in standard at the time. It's expensive, so you had to have like 7 mana just to play it. And you generally had to have 8 mana in case they had 2 answers instead of the 1 answer. So that meant it was only in the control decks. And so like as desperately as I wanted this to be cool and unique and played, it's all a little tiny to play and was only a little, just a smidge as cool as Morphling ever was.
I mean, it's a cool card. I mean, I also appreciate finishers that end games. This is why I'm not horrendously upset about like Hullbreaker Kraken, right? Or Pearl Lake Ancient is another good one of these. I like these giant 6 mana, 7 mana finishers that end games quickly. And Aetherling did that. All you had to do was untap with Aetherling, and the game was over. The game was completely over. And even if you didn't untap with Aetherling, you probably 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 to your opponent, which in the control deck that had Sphinx's Revelation and Wraths and Detention Spheres was going to be good enough.
Yeah, anytime there's like a more controlly deck that actually can kill you when they get to that spot, I'm on board with. When the plan is to cycle through counter spells that put 4 cards back in their deck and then mill you to death, that is a little unbearable. So I'm on board for these cards.
I just, you know what, to me, like either 2 things need to happen here. 1, it needs to cost 5, so 2 blue and 3 generic. For everything else, same thing. Or keep it the same cost, but give it flash. Give it some reason, to EOT slide into the DMs.
The fact that today Aetherling isn't good enough, when it was in standard, it was the finisher. It was the way people ended games. Wild to me.
Was it? You remember those days, buddy? There was a lot of Pearl Ancient, whatever.
No, nobody played Pearl Lake Ancient over Aetherling. This was much better than Pearl Lake Ancient. This was much better. It was either this or you played the Bore You to Tears Elixir of Immortality version. But
and a lot of times
people
they
preferred this, backed up with maybe an Elspeth Sun's Champion or 2. But for the most part, it was card draw, removal, and 1 or 2 copies of this.
All right, let's move here to number 8. Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
All right, so my number 8, I tend to like cards that were good at the time and are still relevant. So we tend to see a lot of like more EDH cards on my list for that reason. And also I just thought this was a really cool card. I remember when this was, the first time I saw this, when the set, was being spoiled. And I just thought it was super interesting, even though I wasn't a huge EDH player at the time either. But I love the art. I love Orzhov, which is the color pairing for this card, and that is Obsidian Ghost Council. Nice. This is a 5/5 creature for 5 mana, colorless, 2 white, 2 black for a legendary spirit advisor. When the council enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile Obsidian. If you do, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. It gains haste. So it continues to drain, and it doesn't punish you. You can still attack and things like that. It was pretty relevant in all of the control decks at the time, and it did some really interesting stuff with Whip of Erebos, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So this is a neat card that's still seeing some play in more social areas and was played a ton then.
Yeah, this was a card that it popped off basically immediately. 5 mana for a 5/5, particularly at the time, was very high end. It was very good stats for the mana cost. We were kind of just getting used to, XX for X mana as a kind of a standard. It's very heavy on the mana requirements, but the Whip of Erebos interaction where you get to choose which effect happens first, which means you can exile the Obstat for it exiles it from the game from the Whip, which was great. The fact that it always dodged sorcery speed removal, so you couldn't Wrath it and you couldn't -X at sorcery speed for it, or use any sorcery speed removal. Thereafter was just a hell of a Magic card for quite a while there, for 9 or 12 months. It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and it wasn't just in the Esper control decks, which it did great things in those decks. It was another one of these cards that a lot of the removal was sorcery speed at the time, your detention spheres, your supreme verdicts, etc. And some of the removal was dependent on the combat step, right? So you couldn't reasonably expect to Azorius Charm an Obsidat. You would just play it and then let it dance, like let it do its thing, and then that was the end of the game. But not just the Abzan decks, or not just the Esper decks. There were Abzan decks that used this alongside, I think this was the Thragtusk Restoration Angel era, where you would play this alongside, just like the generic kind of Unburial Rites kind of stuff. It was just such good stats in such a unique way.
And it was also able to kind of come in against those removal heavy detention sphere Supreme Verdict decks. Instead of a Thragtusk that you can eventually wrath your way out of, you can't wrath your way out of this guy. Just drain 2, go, drain 2, go, drain 2, go, and it will kill you eventually. I assure you. All right, let's see here, Ruben. What's number 8?
In my search, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I could only find 4 cards from either Dragon's Maze or Gatecrash that won a Pro Tour. Not counting the Shocklands, which is a very low number. Maybe there were 5. But it was not a high number, and that makes me very upset. But this is one of them. In fact, this is the one of them, because it is Experiment 1. Experiment 1 is a 1 mana, 1/1 with Evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It also says remove 2 +1/+1 counters from Experiment 1, regenerate Experiment 1. So it is able to grow up into like a Wild Nacatl and then also save itself. And then regrow and then save itself. And also creature type Human Ooze, which is delightful. Really excellent Friday Night Magic promo. Just a really cool card.
I'm double checking. This was on my list as well. I decided to take it off just because it was only like in one deck and isn't really seeing a ton of play now, but it was really impactful at the time when it was, in its day. So, and this is also the type of mechanic that I really like. These sort of kind of creature decks are always near and dear to my heart. So yeah, this card's great. I'm glad it made the list.
Yeah, I mean, the Gatecrash set review with Brad Nelson and I will live in my heart forever as we had misunderstood Evolve. And so we got to go through an entire video where we had no idea how it really worked. We thought it just triggered on power instead of both power and toughness. That's adorable. But this card in particular, this to me is just like, it's a wonderful, amazing design. This is a creature that it makes me sad because Wizards is not going to want to reprint this guy. Like, this is not a creature they want because it has the R word on it, which is regenerate. They don't want to use regenerate. They don't talk about regeneration, even though they have printed it as recently as the Mystery Booster and the RNA Guild Kit. We get regeneration, but for some reason they don't want regeneration, which again, I understand it. It's hard to explain in many ways.
Well,
but it's also
honestly,
right here.
We could get this card, but with training, right? From the set that's upcoming from Crimson Vow.
Right.
And instead of regenerate, make it indestructible.
I mean, you can also see how, if you think about making it for training, there's that white human, right? The 1 mana 1/2 that you remove 2 counters from any creatures you control to disenchant, which even that is way more, powerful than this was. But this card was great, though. I really enjoyed it. Move on here to my number 8. This card was cool. This card also snuck up on me in terms of goodness, that's an expensive Magic the Gathering card. I was not expecting this card to be as expensive as it was, because when I look at, to try to make the list, I like to look at the EDH rec, listing and the price USD, the price, the tick. Sometimes the online stuff can jump out at you for various reasons. And this one, I was like, my God, why is this in the top X cards at all? I didn't remember Cryptgast being this sick, super pricey, crazy expensive rare, but my God, it's almost $10 and they've printed it twice. So the rare from Gatecrash is Cryptgast. It's a black and 3 generic mana for a 2/2 rare spirit that has extort. You'll see this frequently. Extort cards are very popular. Which again, whenever you cast a spell, you can pay a white or a black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add a black to your mana pool in addition to the mana the land produces. So it's a mana flare for black mana, and Rakana Revenant is also very similar in that way that you double some mana. The casuals are on it and they need it in their lives, and Cryptgast is a good example of that.
That's definitely true. I think anytime you get these, cards that can hang around and be fun in more casual or multiplayer formats, the price just goes super high. And I think that has a lot to do with why, Magic has become more collectible as the, card base gets wider, not less. And this is a great example of that, I think.
Yeah, if you put Bubbling Muck on a creature, it's going to be popular. Much less if it also includes a way to stabilize your life total and drain the rest of the table as well. And it pays for itself. Being a 2/2 for 4 is not a huge problem in Commander, especially if you're doubling your mana. So, yeah, Cryptgast is... It says the words that when I read them, I go, yeah, obviously that's a $20 card. Like, that's exactly what Commander wants.
That's exactly what they want. But back in the day, we were like, it's not that good in Standard. It dies to a shock and blah, 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 blah. Does not matter in Commander. Let's move over to number 7. Nerd Girl, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is my second of 4 hires.
Oh boy, Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is hilarious. That sometimes a card is just exactly the card that a deck needs, right? And Cloudfin Raptor is that card.
Sure.
This is like the least impressive Magic card I've ever seen in my life, but it's exactly what the Blue Devotion deck needed. It needed a 1-drop that scaled well, had evasion, and provided a quick pip. And that's what Cloudfin Raptor promises and delivers on. Cloudfin Raptor is a blue mana for a bird mutant that is an 0/1 common from Gatecrash with flying and evolve. It's the best 1-drop in a deck that won the Pro Tour. So, you want this before you play your Frostburn Weirds and your Tide Mages or whatever the thing is that tap down green creatures.
Merfolk something or other.
Merfolk something or other. And then you play your Thassa on turn 3 and Robert's your father's sister.
Father's brother and Fanny's your
father's
auntie.
brother.
Right.
That's the one I meant to say. Anyway, Cloudfin Raptor is stupid and hilarious. The draws that were like turn 1 Cloudfin Raptor, turn 2 more Cloudfin Raptors, and you're just like, ooh, buddy, I'm ready to go. Were always very funny to me as well.
Yeah, this card is like, it's just, it's so innocuous. It's very, this card ain't going to do anything. It's not going to win a Pro Tour. I can't be afraid of seeing this or even 3 of this on turn 2. And then you die. That's kind of what happens to this guy.
I mean, it has the same feeling as like an Ornithopter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, you're playing like these 0/1s or whatever, and then you're just like, oh, I'm dead. Okay, that I get it.
This is the type of card that is super easy to dismiss. This is the type of card that someone goes, you know what, I think this is really good. And then you go something like, excuse me, it's a terrible top deck. And we go, well, we know that. But when you play it on turn 1 with a 2-drop and a 3-drop and so on, this thing is ridiculous and gets that way quick. So you got to be careful when people dismiss stuff like this.
It's also not even that bad of a top deck because it still has evasion. It still has a blue pip that sometimes all you need is just another blue pip to turn your Thassa back on. Mm-hmm. And you're scrying a bunch in that deck and you're drawing a bunch of extra cards. So you're usually not drawing this alone. And if you are, you can put it on the bottom. It's among bad top deck. I mean, this is not the best top deck in the world, but among bad top decks, this is fine most of the time.
Right. I remember the arguments of why this card is bad and you should never play it. And I'm like,
sure.
I know, you gotta be careful. Sometimes those arguments are pretty strawish, as it were. And
then you get pecked to death.
And then you die. For my number 7 here, this was another of the cards I was like, that it's worth what? This card is what? But when you think about it, and you think about the low barrier to entry, you think about the high impact it's going to have on any sort of attack step that you happen to feature this guy in. When you're turning a Legion Loyalist sideways, the game is changing. And the game is changing to at least a $7 to $8 degree because that's how much it costs. Wow. Legion Loyalist is 1 red mana for a rare Goblin Soldier. It's a 1/1 with haste, but it has Battalion. Whenever it and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control gain first strike and trample until end of turn and can't be blocked by creature tokens this turn, which I also think is huge in a world of Commander and token everything, copy everything. This thing gets in for the first strike, it gets in for the lethal attacks, and you can't block it with your dumb tokens. Go.
Yeah, this card does a lot, and I remember this thing being played at the time, even in limited, and it made for some like really interesting combat that your opponent is going to struggle to deal with. And I mean, I'm not opposed to shuffling up some mono red.
I mean, this card was also a house in the Naya Blitz decks, which at the time were quite good alongside Experiment 1 and Boros Elite. Just a bunch, Gruul, Ta, Rampager, I think was in that deck. There's a bunch of random garbage. And also, this is one of the 6 cards in Gatecrash that were like, hey, screw you, Lingering Souls. We've had enough of your crap. It was like every card did something bad to Lingering Souls. It was like, here's a Gruul Charm. All right, here's 2 modes that are good against Gruul Charm. Here's Legion Loyalist that has this tokens phrasing for whatever reason. And it's like, okay. But this card does not ask that much of you. It just asks for 1 mana and 2 other attackers. And that's such a low cost for such a huge payoff that this card is really good.
Yeah, this is a card that I feel like slipped through some of the people who are looking at it sort of their valuations because it's small, right? It's tiny. And when you attack with 2 other creatures, it's likely to die. But if you think if you're attacking with a whole bunch of creatures and they can't use most of their tokens, they can't use any of their tokens to block them, that gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. So high five there. So let's move over to number 6. My number 6 is higher on somebody else's list. Ruben, what is your number 6?
My number 6, I'm going to give you a little bit of history of comedy for.
Oh, boy.
Because there are some iconic jokes in the world, and one of them I will not be telling on this podcast. However, there's a really good... The Aristocrats, which is an iconic piece of humor that... there's a whole movie based on the telling of this joke. And it's basically an exercise in how ribald and tasteless can you get? And then the punchline to the joke. So a family walks into a talent agent's office, and the talent agent says, "What do you got?" And then the talent agent watches this family commit heinous acts, and you just make it up on the spot.
Right.
And then at the end, the punchline is the agent says, "What do you call your act?" And they go, "The Aristocrats." And that's comedy. And you really need a really good teller of the joke to really appreciate it. I highly recommend watching the documentary called The Aristocrats. All of that is to say that we had a deck called The Aristocrats. It was named after 2 of those aristocrats, and one of them was from a cartel. And Cartel Aristocrat is my number 6. Cartel Aristocrat is a white and a black for a 2/2 human advisor that says, sacrifice another creature. Cartel Aristocrat gains protection from the color of your choice until the end of the turn. Sam Black is famous for having said, if a card says, sacrifice a creature, it doesn't matter what happens after that. It could literally say nothing. It could just go, sacrifice a creature, period. And that card would be playable. And Cartel Aristocrat gains protection, is 2 mana. I mean, it does all the things.
Yeah, there's a lot of different synergies that want you to be sacrificing creatures, whether that's to get it into your graveyard, to trigger other bigger things. A lot of value can be had by working with your graveyard, or maybe even your exiling or whatever from there. And that's definitely going to be the case. This card's awesome.
They haven't, I'm trying to think, I know they've came kind of close to this before, but I don't recall us ever having a creature that has somewhat of a positive ability with a sacrifice another creature in front of it that doesn't also require mana or also require something else. Generally, it's mana. If you can sacrifice for free, the warning light starts showing up and you're like, oh god, oh god. Also interesting, this is the only Magic card that has the word cartel in its name, and I'm pretty sure that's going to change when Streets of New Capenna show up with demon crime families. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Maybe we'll get a reprint of Cartel Aristocrat. That'd be nice.
But yeah,
there was a minute there where well, first of all, they gave us this, Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, and Verals in very quick succession. And then they were like, oh, we shouldn't do that anymore. And then they didn't give us a free sack outlet for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, years and years.
Yeah, we're back now. We've had Nantucko Husk and we've had some other stuff. But this one definitely showed the power of messing around with sacrifice triggers.
All right, Nerd Girl, what's number 6?
All right, so mine is my number 6 is simple but near and dear to my heart. Kind of as a red player when I need to play constructed, and that's Skullcrack. There's nothing more annoying than when your opponent stops the entire game plan of your deck. So with this very simple $2 uncommon, we can, for 2 mana, players cannot gain life this turn, damage cannot be prevented, and this deals 3 damage to their face. This is exactly what I want to have access to in any of my burn decks. I took this to the Pro Tour with Boros Burn, and yeah, it's great.
I mean, the answer to the Barbarian's riddle is to choke on your cleverness and die. You have
a great flavor text.
Yeah, it's not this one, but it is similar. Skullcrack is fantastic. And again, this is like $2.50 uncommon.
Yeah.
It's just super rare in what it does. Not a lot of cards do this.
It's 2 mana for 3 damage, which is a little bit overcosted, but it's instant speed, prevents life gain, and prevents prevention. So if I attack with my Goblin Guide and you block with your core Firewalker, which is like the Burn Mage's worst enemy, you Skullcrack and you get rid of the Firewalker, and also they don't gain any life.
Right.
Yeah.
So Skullcrack solves a ton of problems.
Or if you're doing it in response to what is it? Is it Cult Arms? The one that gains life and makes dudes? That's just the bane of my existence. So it's just ha!
Yeah, the newest one is Sunset Revelry, where they're like, okay, hey guys, gain life, draw cards.
That's the
shut up.
reinforcements. Yeah, I hate
so
that.
if you're looking at it that way, it's 2 mana for 9 damage or some obnoxious number, which is fantastic.
I mean, there's a reason it's slow up there. It's desperate for a reprint, like Wizards. Desperate for a reprint. All right, let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
So I cheated with my number 5. I have 2 cards at my number 5, but they do the same thing. They are also both banned in Pioneer for the same reason. So I just put them together because you can't really talk about one without the other. My number 5 is Undercity Informer and Balustrade Spy. They effectively have the same text. One of them's a human rogue, one of them is a vampire rogue. They're both 2/3s. They both deck you for 4 total mana if you have no lands in your deck. So the idea, this is like the 1 land spy variant, is what the deck typically was called, which is basically you build your deck with all of the double-sided land spell cards and a bunch of, traditionally Goblin Charbelcher kind of cards where you get the 1 land out of your deck. Then you mill yourself, putting everything into your graveyard, and then you win somehow after that, typically with something like Narcomoeba or Crippling Chill or Dread Return or whatever. Basically, if you flip your library face up, you can win the game, and this helps you do that, and that's why these both are banned in Pioneer.
These are from the same set?
I know, right?
Why?
One's an uncommon, one's a rare, one has flying, one doesn't.
Well, one's a common, one's an uncommon, but yeah.
Yeah. One's an uncommon.
Okay.
I guess they thought they were really going to need access to that particular ability. I don't know why we would have them in the same set, but here we are.
I mean, how many times have you seen this type of ability just bite Wizards in the butt over and over again? Whenever it's a reveal until X, it's always, what if you only have one of it? Whenever it's a X mana or less, it's always, well, what's the next or most powerful thing you can do under that mana cost? Over and over, we see these types of things where you don't really know how it's going to be broken. You just know it's going to be broken. It's just a question of when. Nerd Girl, what's number 5?
All right, so my number 5 is one of the few cards on my list that don't have any long-term playability, but I put it on my list at number 5 because it's near and dear to my heart for how much money it made me. As at this point in my life, I was drafting a ton, and there was nothing more common for you to see and pick up that would just pay for the rest of your Magic for the entire week, and that was Boros Reckoner.
Nice.
This only a rare was $30.
Yeah.
It was in one of the best decks in the format. You needed 4 of them. And I've never really seen rares just that are in the current set, not just in standard, but actually being drafted every day, still be $30 for whatever reason. Yeah. So Boros Reckoner is a 3 mana 3/3 for hybrid white-red. X3. And whenever Boros Reckoner is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target creature or player. And then for 1 hybrid white-red, you can give it first strike until end of turn. This is insane. Super easy to cast, very aggressive, is nuts to deal with. And it was just worth oodles of money and just paid for 2 drafts.
Yeah, yep. Ruben, if you want to tell them about the Boros Charm interaction.
Yeah, I guess I should do that. So Boros Charm with Boros Reckoner was an infinite combo where you made the Boros Reckoner indestructible and then dealt it a damage somehow, either in combat, with some other pinger, and then just kept dealing damage to itself. Which was able to sort of stack up that damage over and over and over again, and then you could, laser beam somebody.
Right, because when it's dealt that damage, it deals that much to something else, so you just keep dealing itself damage, and then it just keeps dealing it to stuff else, and then you lose. And this card was also, famously not previewed from the set at all in Gatecrash. This was the last, if I recall correctly, this was the only rare that they either didn't preview or didn't show beforehand. This was one of the rares that came out when the full set was reviewed, was unveiled. It's like, hey, the card gallery is out. And when people went through the card gallery, they're like, wait a minute, what's this card? And they put that card together and they were like, wait a minute, this seems really ridiculous. And before you knew it, you had the most insanely expensive rare in a long time in Standard Magic at that point.
There was a pretty popular Jeskai deck that had, of course, a Zorius Charm, which gave it lifelink. So the combo would gain you infinite life because it would deal itself. So you'd play Boros Charm, Zorius Charm, deal itself 1,000,000 damage, gain 1,000,000 life. Right. Also, that deck just had Harvest Pyre in it, which dealt damage equal to the number to a creature equal to the number of cards you removed from your graveyard. So basically, you would just be playing Magic. And then suddenly and without warning, you'd Harvest Pyre your Reckoner for 20 and kill your opponent.
Yep.
I opened a foil one of these at Pro Tour Montreal, was Pro Tour Gatecrash, and got rid of it. I think Stibbs put it in his cube at the time. But yeah, I remember that this card was $1,000,000 and for a rare in a Mythic era. That was very strange.
I just remember going like, man, why was this not previewed? Why was this not cool enough to give to literally any outlet? This card's insane. All right, so for my number 5, we're back to yet another card of it's worth how much again, even though it's been reprinted twice. That's really weird, but again, it's also one of those cards that it's low on the sort of opportunity cost. I guess the way it's low on the mana cost, but you could also say opportunity cost, because once you play it out there, it's going to affect the game until somebody deals with it, and generally they're not going to, because they don't want to spend resources and time and effort to get rid of your stupid little blind obedience. It just makes all of your stuff enter tapped, and that's really annoying. Well, blind obedience does more than that. It's a white and a generic mana for a rare enchantment from Gatecrash. It has Extort, which means you cast a spell, you pay a white or a black, and it drains the life from all your opponents. Artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And again, in a world where you're making a ton of tokens, or tokens with haste at exile, stuff like that, this little card will screw you up big time, and is kind of expensive as a result, even after it showed up in Commander 2016 and 2017.
Okay, I mean, the Commander 2016, 2017 or whatever, those are, they're not reprinted in like a major set, so I could definitely see why it would still be, a little bit on the pricier side, because they get a little less circulation possibly than, just in a booster box or whatever. But yeah, this is definitely a card that's going to see some long-term play.
And has.
I mean, this effect is huge. I mean, at the time, it was Thundermaw Hellkite that you were really worried about. But this will also keep your Legion Loyalists, right? I mean, there's a bunch of combo tooth and nail things that you can do, and a very simple Kismet effect will keep them at bay. We see Authority of the Console sees play in Historic. We've seen this effect be competitive before. This one, of course, being much better for Commander because the Extort is so much better for Commander. And also makes the artifacts enter tapped, which is not irrelevant in a format where artifact mana is so hugely prevalent. I had this in my Arcades deck for a while, even though I didn't really have any other interactions with it. Like, it was just that good and that kind of effect that I wanted.
Now, for those who don't recall, because I'm old man magic here, he ran out Kismet. Now, if you don't know what Kismet is, it's an enchantment from Legends. $26 enchantment from Legends, 58-cent 4th edition uncommon.
Sure.
For a white and 3 generic mana, it's an enchantment that has all of your opponent's creatures, lands, and artifacts interplay tapped into the battlefield tapped.
So this was the combo with Stasis back in the day. Your opponent couldn't do anything. And then this was a planar chaos color shifted. They put it in blue with Frozen Ether.
Nice. Yeah, and then you have to play Sarah Angels, so you can kill them and not have to have vigilance, and that would have it a keyword back then, for God's sake. I'm an old man. Moving on here to number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is the higher that I have that's on somebody else's list.
Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
Also higher. Third of 4th.
Well, fine.
Third of 4.
Third of 4. Well, I will pull the 4th listing way here. The idea for my number 4 was, again, the looking cards, checking them out. All this card's cool. I remember that card. That card's sweet. Sort of all the different ways. I'm like, mother of God, this is almost $20 card. What? The guild kit version is even more expensive because of the new art that looks absolutely incredible for it. And it turns out when you give players extra attack steps, that's just casual goodness. You can't not love Aurelia, the War Leader. Aurelia, the War Leader, is 2 white, 2 red, 2 generic mana, 6 mana for a 3/4 mythic legendary angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. And whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. And that's just good, clean living right there.
Yeah, I like this card. I'm actually, you said this is still a little on the pricey side?
Like $18+, yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of happy to see it. I loved this card when it was, in standard, and opening it in limited was so much fun. Like getting a win with this is nuts, and it felt like amazing. You needed to be kind of ahead anyway, so it was kind of a win more situation. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just like, oh, they played Planeswalker, boo. So it's still fun, and didn't really, I think, hurt the game too much. But yeah, I love to hear that this is still being played. I'm guessing more EDH type stuff, but yeah, this is awesome.
I mean, Mythic Angels and all that.
Very popular. Yeah, of course. If it's a Mythic Angel, legendary Mythic Angel, people are going to buy it, regardless of its commander playability. But it is commander playable, and I know that it's one of the more popular Boros commanders because this is what you want to be doing. You want I want attack steps. That I want them now, and I want multiples of them. Mm-hmm. This also gives me an opportunity to talk to Evan about Aurelia's Fury, which was a great moment in the career of Mr. Orange, in which he predicted that Aurelia's Fury, which was like a weird Boros fireball, was going to be like the end-all be-all of Magic, and that didn't happen.
It was poop. It was really poop. I felt bad about that one. Look, Aurelia's Fury, we might as well bring it up here, because why not? Aurelia's Fury is a card that I didn't properly, like back in the day, all right, look, it wasn't that far back, but back in some amount of days, I like to get excited about Magic cards. I like to throw out one position or other if I like a Magic card, and Lord knows I fell on the wrong side of this one. Aurelia's Fury is a white, a red, and an X. It's a mythic instant, by the way. We didn't have a lot of mythic instants back then, by the way. This is one of the first. But a mythic instant deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or players. Tap each creature dealt damage this way. Players dealt damage this way can't cast non-creature spells this turn. So the Christmas land wheels were turning, and they can't play their wraths. They can't play the removal spells that they draw. All their creatures are tapped and can't do anything. Like, all of this stuff shuts down your opponent, but it turns out X blank blank a mana cost doesn't really matter what it is. It's just too much mana. Like, it doesn't matter. It's not good enough, and this proved it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You were wrong. I don't know if I believe it.
Oh, whoa, hey, everybody. Well, that was the number 4. So we're gonna move on here to number 3. Nerd Girl, what's number 3?
My last of 4 hires.
Whoa. Well, let me tell you what. So good is Ruben and I at our number 3. We have the same number 3.
Yeah.
This is, I can imagine, his only entry from the world of Dragon's Maze. This is my 3rd because I want to like the set a lot. I do. This is also one of the cards that was, you go back and you look at the history of every mythic rare Wizards has ever made, and you look at all of them. And I just feel like this is one of the most egregious, where Wizards was like, we really need a chase, rare for this set. We don't have one. They swapped around a bunch of art. And what were we left with, Ruben?
We were left with Voice of Resurgence. Voice of Resurgence is a green-white 2/2 elemental creature that has the following ability. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, or when Voice of Resurgence dies, create a green and white elemental creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. Very mid-rangey. It discouraged instants, which were very popular in all of the control decks. It gave you wrath protection. At least something stayed on the board. There's a very delightful Evan Irwin elemental token out there with his 5 kids sitting on shoulders.
And famous cards like in my branches and stuff. And like it's all kinds of stuff.
Very good in Standard, very good in Birthing Pod, in Modern, very good for a while. Sort of has fallen by the wayside at this point, but it's a very good card.
Yeah, this was one of the few cards that were worth a ton of money. It was a staple in any of the Selesnya or Abzan mid-range decks. It kind of enabled a lot of them. And this was the big ticket item, with the exception of the Shocklands to get. And again, you said it's kind of fallen by the wayside, and I think that's just because Pod's not a thing, right? But it was kind of a staple in that deck. So it was amazing in the Standard format. It found a home in Modern, before that deck got axed. But yeah, this was definitely an interesting card and made the set not atrocious to open.
I'm trying to remember the exact story. I can tell you right now, if you look at Amara Tandris is a rare from the set, from Dragon's Maze, and you look behind her in the background of Amara Tandris is the token, quote unquote, that Voice of Resurgence makes. If you look at the token image for Voice of Resurgence. So they swapped around art and like names and abilities and stuff to pump this thing as far as they could. And Lord knows they got it there. It was a tournament staple. It did help sell the set. And in a set that was really super disappointing, at least we still had Voice of Resurgence.
Right.
This was my number 4.
So we're all right there.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It felt like the right spot to put Voice of Resurgence here. I think that clearly Voice of Resurgence not being a legendary creature makes it better, but I think that it actually would have maintained its value better as a commander card if they had kept it the original way. And of course, Imara Tandris being a 5/7 makes no sense. And this art makes a lot more sense on a 5/7. So It would have been cool to have it, you look back at history and you get your timelines mixed up and what could have been. The timeline that we're in is fine. I think that it's good that it wasn't legendary for its time in the sun.
We have no magic what if, but what if? Let's move on here to number 2. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
So my number 2 is actually a card we talked a little bit about already, that found a home in Standard at the time, still has a bit of a home in Modern, and a lot in, more casual gameplay like EDH. And it is near and dear to my heart because you guys know what I like to do. What's better than 3 damage to my opponent? And that is 4 damage for Boros Charm.
Whee!
For a plains and a mountain, you have an instant speed. You can choose one. Boros Charm deals 4 damage to target player. Or permanents you control are indestructible this turn, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So you get a lot of different modes on this that lets you... I think the EDH loves the indestructible side of things. My Modern deck really just kind of wants to for you in the face. But also you get some prowess creatures where maybe it's possible that double strike is just going to be better. So it's nice to have a little bit of flexibility there. And the fact that this uncommon is seeing play still in Eternal formats is a pretty good sign for the card itself as far as being powerful.
They pushed this one about as far as it would go. Mm-hmm. I mean, for 2 mana, the Lava Rift that just hits them, the instant speed, one of the cool parts about this card is that it's just as cool and exciting and interesting now as it was the day they previewed it. Damn, that card is a lot.
2 mana, 4 damage. I mean, it doesn't really need the other modes. I've definitely gotten People's Wastelands with this card. I think I've used the double strike once, maybe twice. But 2 mana, 4 damage. I would play that card in a heartbeat every day of the week. Mm-hmm. And this card is stayed the test of time just because those numbers are very good.
And because we have really cool formatting these days, we now have little bullet points next to all the options instead of being the comma, 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 which is nice.
Comma chameleon.
Right. I see what you did there. Ruben, what's number 2?
Well, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their entrances and exits, and one man in his time plays many parts, and one land in its time plays many parts. My number 2 is Thespian's Stage.
Mm-hmm.
Thespian's Stage is a rare from Gatecrash that taps for a wingding, or a colorless, and it has pay 2 generic and tap it. Thespian Stage becomes a copy of target land, except it has this ability. This card's great. This card has been a staple in Legacy and Vintage. This was your number 9.
Nice.
Mostly for copying Dark Depths. Very popular in the lands deck, as the interaction between those 2 cards means that if you have those 2 on the board and pay 2 mana and sacrifice them both, you get a 20/20. So you get like a turn 2 20/20 with this card. It has like self built in wasteland protection, because if they try to wasteland you, you can copy a basic land, which is always fun. And you can also just copy generic other stuff. Like if I have a Cloud Post laying around, or my opponent has a Volrath Stronghold I want access to, that's great.
Nice.
Yeah, I think you said just about everything, like, the Legacy lands and then the key piece of the Dark Depths combo. I had it much lower on my list only because it is more restrictive. It's not played quite as wide. So it's not something you're going to see terribly often or in a lot of decks, but it's definitely something that impacted an Eternal format. And I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, and like as from a sort of story perspective, it's cool that John Avon illustrated this one, which was nice, and it has like it's telling the story of like the Ravnican, sort of what happened at the Guild Pact, wars and things that happened many years ago, but they're kind of telling it again on a different stage. Super cool and thematic, and I love that. And
honestly, that's why I have it so high. Like, this art is beautiful. The stage tells the story of the absolution of the Guild Pact with more of current day, quote unquote, Ravnica in the background. You have the actors who are playing Argus Kos and Zadek in the foreground. You have the costumes, these really interesting, intricate set pieces. It makes me feel happy.
I wonder if Ruben was a theater kid.
Yeah. So I was actually going to say, so like I have it on my list low because it's not like impactful, and you have it up high because it's all flavorful and stuff. If that doesn't say anything about you and I, Ruben, I don't know what would.
Nice.
But yeah, that makes sense.
I'm a theater nerd.
There you go. Well, for my number 2 here, this is another card that, like, again, I was just like, it's a 2+. If you want this in foil, the original foil is $13+ at this point. This is a card that is useful in every which way. It's only been reprinted once officially. It did show up in the Mystery Booster Retail Edition foils. Okay. But in reality, it showed back up in Commander Legends, which is great because it's one of the best uncommons ever printed. And we could definitely use more copies of Wear and Tear. Wear is a red and generic mana instant. This is where we have the split spells that you can fuse together by paying both costs, so you get both effects. One half on the left is Wear for a red and generic mana. It's an instant that says destroy target artifact. And Tear is 1 white mana that destroys target enchantment. So if you pay 3 mana, you get to do both. Isn't that great? So it slices, it dices. It's perfect for every red-white commander deck on the planet, and that's why it's $2+ no matter where you find it.
Yeah, this was on my short list as well. It was something I was really considering putting on there. And it's a popular card and sometimes hard to find. Like, I've definitely been at a tournament where I needed some of this for like my sideboard and just couldn't for the life of me find someone who had it, which is surprising because like it is super popular. And for an uncommon, right? This is kind of up there as far as how often you're going to see it. It's pretty interesting.
The heyday of Wear Tear was Legacy when Miracles was around, or much more prevalent, I should say, back when Top was a thing and Top Counterbalance was a thing. Because 3 is a really tough casting cost to put on top of your library, and you could basically target the Counterbalance, target the top, find a 3, I guess, like good luck. I hope you have a Vendilion click.
Or
in
that
your
one
deck,
Vendilion click, that Misers. Yeah,
exactly.
That would get you.
So there was, this was before True Name Nemesis. So this was just a really excellent card. Like, you could pay 1 mana to destroy a thing, pay 2 mana to destroy a thing, pay 3 mana to get Hull Breach. Like, you had so many options with this card. I'm also excited to just see Fuse in a top 10. Like, I didn't have one, so Fuse is a really cool evolution of the split cards, so I think it's really nice.
And if I want to take you back just real fast, Old Man Magic style. Look, in 2009, and, I had been to Mania Magic tournament, grinded Mania Magic event, and played, and found, this situation where you go to an event, you go to a PTQ, most specifically in the morning, you're looking for X copies of Y card, you just can't find it, and you'll just pay like anything to get any copies. And the vendors will start paying stupid prices, like $5 for a Circle Protection Red, something crazy like that. And so when I got to go to the Pro Tour, and I'll be damned if it wasn't the morning of the Pro Tour, and they weren't selling wax and wanes for $20 and they were selling them. The vendors were begging, like they had announcements on the intercom. They were buying them for $10. Bring your wax wanes to them so they could sell them for twice as much. That's what's necessary for that event. And Wear and Tear gives me that exact same feeling of like, sometimes you just need that super disenchant. Let's go. And it's hard to find. And that's why it's $2+
Yeah.
All right. Let's move here to our number one. Nerd Girl, what's your number one?
So, like Ruben's number 5, I kind of cheated. I was looking at the list and, we're kind of digging on this particular retro on like what is still relevant, what is good. And I think we cannot argue that the most impactful thing in this entire chunk is Shocklands.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and picked what I thought to be one of the most relevant ones, and that's Watery Grave. This is, these things were reprinted, and so they dropped super low and immediately climbed back up. We've seen a ton of these hit the market, and they're always going to be worth money. So, this is going to make the mana base for so many Eternal formats from now until forever. So I went ahead and put Watery Grave on my list. I hope that's not too super cheats, but
No, but like, oh my God, the original foil Ravnica and Watery Grave is $250+
for the foil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
Oh man, that hurts my hurt parts. This whole cycle, if you don't know, they're basic land types. They deal you 2 damage if they enter the battlefield untapped. But my God, the Zendikar Expedition, Watery Grave is $240+. This is like, it's one of those things that like, no matter how they do it, slice and dice it, they're $10 bills. They're always going to be $10 bills, at least up from there. Up to $20 if they stop reprinting them for a while, but generally $10 no matter what happens.
Yeah, the other key thing is they're both land types, so you could fetch them up, which you can't do with a lot of these like dual type fast or slow lands. So this is just, for me, what made the set worth opening.
Yeah. This is definitely the money that was in the set. This is definitely the headliner. Especially Watery Grave in particular experienced a bit of another shining moment in the sun with the Death's Shadow decks, because you want to deal as much damage to yourself as you possibly can to get your Death Shadows down and then go to town. And there's not a ton better ways to do that than like fetch land, go get Watery Grave, Thoughtseize you, next turn, do the same thing, play a Death Shadow. That's pretty great. And also this printing of it, Gatecrash, is why these cards are in Pioneer. So
yeah,
that's it. I think it's completely fine to put these at number 1.
Nice.
Another thing, I think when they did the Dragon's Mage version, we talked about kind of how it was a kind of a dud set. I wouldn't surprise me because they had, the printings of these and the other two sets split up. They were like, man, this is kind of a dud. Like, we need to put something in this to make this set sell. And I think that they might have added the like partial replacement for putting Shocklands in over the basics in some of those packs just to sort of supplement it, because it's not something we've ever really seen them do just as like an aside, right? Like, let's just take out random lands and put in $10 bills for you because the rest of the set is awful.
Dragon's Maze, I think for sure. It's rough, but ultimately, Shocklands, and the joke with Shocklands is that they gave them names that could go literally anywhere. Only printed in Ravnica sets.
Well, the Secret Lair gave us some new settings for some of the Shocklands. The Watery Grave in particular taking place on Ixalan, having a very piratey shipwreck kind of feel to it. So they were like, we'll throw you a bone. We'll put we'll give you a couple of of like, we'll put the Stomping Ground in, I think Stomping Ground's in Ikoria or one of the other behemoth places, like big monster stomping around kind of places.
Right.
Anyway, they explored a little bit with the setting with the names, but you're right. These are at home in Ravnica.
I'll take it. Ruben, what's number one?
My number one is a card that I feel like it had to be my number one. It kind of surprised me that it had to be my number one, but again, basically none of the cards from either of these sets won a Pro Tour. And that's one of my main barometers, is it needs to be in a Pro Tour winning deck. It needs to be in a dominant deck, not just a flash in the pan. This card was the premier 3-drop in the 3 best decks of the time, which were Esper Control, Esper Midrange, Blue Devotion, and Black Devotion. Nightveil Spectre is my number one.
Nice.
Nightveil Spectre costs 3 mana, 3 Dimir mana, which means you can either pay a blue or a black for the mana. It is a 2/3 Spectre with flying. Whenever Nightveil Spectre deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of their library. You may play lands and cast spells from among exiled cards, from cards exiled with Nightveil Spectre. This was the way that you turned on your devotion in blue and black to get those Grey Merchants of Asphodel to deal a bunch of damage, or to turn your Thassa's on and swing in for 5. It was a flyer. It was very difficult to deal with. It was at the right point in the curve to where you wanted to be doing something in control, because, or, you had a couple of removal spells, but you also wanted to have a bridge in the mid game. And this also kind of drew cards. It was a card advantage engine in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So Nightveil Spectre was exactly the right card at exactly the right time to be the number one on my list.
This was my number 7.
Nice.
Yeah, it was just a huge piece in, like you said, mono blue and mono black, and that's why it made my list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a card that fit, again, what you wanted on turn 3. You want Cloudfin into the, what's that called? The 2-drop one? The 2 red, blue red guy?
Frostburn Weird?
Frostburn Weird, thank you.
Yeah.
Cloudfin, Frostburn Weird, and the Nightveil Spectre. That was the nut draw, whether it was Thassa or Nightveil Spectre. Those were your 2 different nut draws, essentially, of like, it's got the 3 toughness, so it's going to trigger that Cloudfin again, which is important. Like, it was card advantage, and nothing less, it gave you, draw you more cards, regardless of what they are. I don't care if they're the lands or something. It's drawing you cards. It makes your opponent feel really bad. They never want you to you never want to let them hit you with the Nightveil Spectre because of that. It's very sort of similar to, the Gonti thing or whatever. It's like, I don't like it when you see my deck and take my stuff, and that's all this card ever did.
I mean, Thief of Sanity saw play and is significantly worse than Nightveil Spectre, I think.
The Thief of Sanity see play? Oh yeah, the blue-red guy.
It's a little bit of play.
You're right. I'm thinking of a different card. Sorry. Think of Sire of Insanity. I'm like, whoa.
No. Thief of Insanity is the 2/2 flyer for 3.
For 3.
That steals things from the top of your library.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing sees play. It's an evasive threat on turn 3. It's got that Hypnotic Spectre kind of feel of like, oh, what do I do about this 2-power flyer that I can never, ever beat? And this one, had a bunch of other cool things going for it. It had the devotion pips. It had 3 toughness, so it could tangle. It did all the things it needed to do.
All right. Well, speaking of doing all the things it needs to do, for my number 1, which is Ruben's number 4 and Nerd Girl's number 3 by process of elimination. This is a card that is frankly, it's fantastic. And also, frankly, it's my number 1 for a few reasons. 1, it's absolutely incredible. It was a tournament all-star, got played from the moment it was in standard to out. It saw some play in, I guess, Pioneer/Modern. It saw plenty of play. It's seen play in Historic now because it's an Historic thanks to the first Historic anthology. It slices, it dices, and it's another famously just 100% missed by both Brad Nelson and myself. When we spoke about this set for the first time, we're like, why is Burning Tree Emissary? Is this card any good? I don't get it. Do you think it's good? I'm not sure. Do you think it's good? I'm not sure. And that's kind of where we left it many years ago, but turns out pretty solid. Burning Tree Emissary is 2 Gruul mana, green/red mana twice for a 2/2 uncommon human shaman. And when it enters the battlefield, it just adds a red and green mana to your mana pool. That's all it does. And then you play another one, and then it adds to the red and green mana pool, and then you play another one, and it adds a red and green mana pool, and then your opponent scoops. That's my take on it anyway.
It's a key piece in Gruul aggro. I mean, this thing is suspended in Historic, which, I mean, it just keeps coming back, and it keeps being as annoying and as powerful as ever. Mm-hmm. This is definitely worth having on the list for sure.
I'm glad they took it off the suspension list now, because the deck that I've been playing most in Historic is Shamans. And this has some really interesting interactions with Shamans, particularly Harmonic Prodigy, where you can play that on turn 2 and then play this on turn 3, and it triggers twice. So you get to play a Collected Company on turn 3, which is also nice. This is a Frogmite, and Frogmite was a powerhouse in Standard and in older formats. So, it's a free 2/2. And so you go turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary, another thing. Like, who cares? A can of fish. Doesn't really matter. Interacts really well with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. Interacts really well with a bunch of the devotion stuff, obviously. And it also fixes your mana. You can go mountain, and then play a green creature after this. This thing does all the things that this creature type of deck would want to do, which is just get an early beater for free.
This is a good example, I think. This is a good example of, if you were ever to, make your own card game one day, and you were to make a card that doesn't look that good, but is actually one of the best cards in the game, and best sort of playable gameplay. It feels good to play, feels good to play with. This is an example of that, and that, it doesn't look like it does that much, in my opinion. It's fine. It adds a couple mana, whatever. It's a 2-mana for 2, it adds a couple mana. But it is so much more than that. I've been nothing but impressed over the years by how cool this card happens.
And the fact that it still isn't that broke. Like, it did get suspended in Historic.
It did.
But it didn't really ever see any play in Legacy. It didn't really ever see any play in Modern. It was a powerhouse in multiple formats. It was very, very, very good. But it's fine. And you look back on it and you're still like, man, I miss those Burning Tree Emissary decks.
And you can still play them right now in Historic. Yeah. Check them out. And that was our top 10 Gatecrash and Dragon's Maze cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, stay warm or cool, depending on where you live.
Or leave your windows open, because it's great in my sweatshirt, because it's like 50 degrees out there. I don't care. All right, cool.
That's the wrong type of magic on your sweatshirt.
There you go. Well, I still got magic on me one way or another. As we move to our final slide, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.